I'm delighted to introduce Debbie Simpson. I'll say a bit about Debbie as a background, if I may.
Of course.
But as a part of the residential, we like to try and make sure that you gain from the experience of people who've been through the programme and who've been through it successfully. And I can certainly tell you that Debbie has achieved that. Actually, Debbie was on our MSc programme prior to this doctoral programme, and she graduated from that, I think, in 2007.
Yeah.
Started with our doctoral programme in cohort 3.
Yes.
In 2010, and completed and was awarded her PhD in 2015. So Debbie has been with us in the department and has moved through the programme and has completed that successfully. So this morning you're going to gain the experience from Debbie of that, of the journey, both from the point of view of what she's done in terms of the research and what she's done in terms of the experience of the programme. And we're breaking it into two parts so that she'll talk about the work that she's done in terms of the research first, and then there will be opportunity later to ask questions about that, but also to talk. She'll be willing to talk about her experience of the programme and some of the things that she found out along the way that helped to get her to the point of success. And you'll have chance to ask, whatever you like about what might help you in terms of knowing about the sorts of things that might help you in terms of your own successes. Debbie's topic for her thesis was, it's quite a long one. So
I'm good at long titles.
The title was Reboot or Rehash: A Critical Realist Exploration of Structural Factors and Teacher Agency in the Context of Implementing the Computing National Curriculum in England. And I think, as I've said to you before, titles are really important when you come to a thesis, because you need to make sure that your title is followed through in terms of what comes later. So the title is important, and I'm sure that Debbie will talk about that.
Does that pass then, Don?
Yeah. That's a good pass. Yeah.
That's really...
So when Debbie was on the programme, she was actually at the University of Cumbria. She was a principal lecturer there at the University of Cumbria. Actually, now she's working here at the university here in Lancaster in a slightly different role, which is more to do with work-based workplace learning. And we're delighted that Debbie is here and with us in Lancaster, but also delighted that she was able to work with us through the programme and gain her PhD. So over to you, Debbie. Welcome.
Thank you, Dan. Hi, it's really great to meet you all, and I'm really looking forward to finding out where you are on your own particular journeys. So, because I know, although if you've only just started the programme, you might have been years thinking about this, deciding to do it, waiting for the right time, so you're probably a long way on that journey already in terms of getting your head into that PhD-ness so that you're ready to go for it. So who here is a brand newbie this year? How many of you? Hi, welcome, so good, you're still here. And who's an old hand? All the experienced people there. Welcome to you all. It'd be good to hear about your different perspectives. Okay, so don't get put off by the title. I thought I probably ought to make a bit of a show at doing something a bit academic-y here, but don't worry, it's not all going to be highly academic. In fact, what I said to Don, that my first title was rejected because it was a bluffer's guide to a PhD. So then I tried with what we ended up with, which is, because titles are my thing, which is how did I do it? And more importantly, how are you people going to do it? And it's only worthwhile me coming here this morning if something that you can ask me or something that happens this morning can actually help you with what you're doing. So be looking out for that's what she did, but I wouldn't do that, or, whatever. So here we go. I'm going to have to keep coming back here because we haven't got clicker, but never mind. Sure, I can live with that. So that's a proud moment. That is a proud moment. When you come out of that Viva and you're waiting and it feels like 3 hours and then they go, it's fine, welcome, Dr. Debbie. And you're, oh my goodness, it's all worth it. All that sort of, persistence is worth it. So not long for you. You'll be there. And you've got to get your passport changed and everything else with that on there. Okay, so I wish it was like that. I wish, when somebody says, come and tell us how this was for you, you get really tempted to make a lovely narrative of it and say, actually, well, it went like this, and then I had this little problem, and then I got over it, and then I did this, and then there's this nice amount of personal growth in it. And I wish it was like that, but it's not like that. It's more like a trip to IKEA. I think the slides, I'm happy to make the slides available if people want them after, so don't feel you have to write anything down or whatever. So you go, you think you know what you're going to do, you think you're going to be in and out of there pronto, you think that your plans are all, and then you go in and you wander around and you get lost and you have a coffee and you change your mind and you come back out again and you lose your temper and you want to just throw the trolley down and leave. But eventually you come out with a basket full of stuff you didn't expect you wanted. And then you get home and you've got to put it all together. And that's what the PhD is like. It's not a lovely, that's what it was like for me. For you guys, maybe it's a lovely narrative arc. Good luck. But not so much for me. So here is one of the most important people in my life. For international students, I probably, a few words here about why this guy was so significant. Does any of our local students want to say who he is for the benefit of people not lucky enough to know?
A polite term or?
Any term? Who is he?
Michael Gove.
Yeah, Michael Gove. And what was his job a couple of years ago? Can you remember?
Minister for Education.
Yeah, he was the Minister for Education. Interesting guy. Now, that's a quote. ICT in schools is a mess, right? So my background is in teacher education. Well, before that, it's in computing teaching, because I started off teaching technology in schools in the really early days when we had really old computers there, and the BBC very kindly funded computing in schools a little bit. And I got really intrigued because my own children were of an age when they were interested, beginning to be interested. And so I somehow ended up in teacher training, teaching primary and secondary trainees and also serving teachers, practitioners in schools, with computers, so professional development in computing. In those days, it was only 2012, it was known as ICT. So computing in schools, or technology in schools, was known as ICT, Information and Communications Technology, as a subject in the curriculum. And I went to a BET event, British Educational Technology something, which was what is it?
Technology and training.
Technology and training. So I used to attend this big thing at Olympia in London every year, And in 2012, the guest speaker was Michael Gove, and we all stood there. And he told a whole room of IT teachers and people who were selling IT teachers stuff that ICT in schools is a mess. And we sort of went, rocked back. And he gave, he gave quite a passionate speech about why he thought it was a mess. And he didn't really give us much of a clue at the time about what he was intending to do about it, but he was intending to do something about it. And we were standing in the audience, and one of the stallholders who I knew because we'd bought stuff from them turned around to me, knowing I'm in teacher training, and said, "So it's your fault then?" Right, okay, so I think I need to think about this because, well, we'll go into it more. But anyway, this guy was the guy who kicked it off, and that was the moment when I sort of decided what my thesis focus, my research focus was going to be about. Because, and whisper it, I hadn't a clue. I had no clue. I'd got almost up to writing my proposal. Time was ticking away, and I knew it was obviously was going to be something about computing. Clues in the title, isn't it, of the course? But I didn't really know what. And then I thought, right, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to have a think about this, find out some more. So here's my background. Those are the first computers that I started working with in schools. There's Granny's Garden, which was really groundbreaking stuff when I started in terms of animation and interactivity. It was fantastic, like an adventure story that children used to play with. Anybody ever play with one of those in school? It's a little floor robot called a roamer, and you press the buttons on it, make it move about. So floor robot. And loads of fun in school with technology. I then started working with Clio, which was Cumbria and Lancashire Education Online. I then moved to University of Cumbria doing teacher training. I then got involved in School Direct, which is teacher training based in schools in partnership with the university. And then it sort of ballooned. I got involved in many more kinds of computing and teacher education events and different things that were going on. I even wrote a couple of books, edited a couple of books and wrote bits of them about teaching ICT in schools, and ultimately ended up working a little bit with the computing department here. So I couldn't say I had clean hands. If it was true, ICT in schools was a mess, and it needed to be, it was actually, I think he said it was actively damaging children, then I had blood on my hands here, didn't I? So there's nothing like a really powerful incentive, and that's kind of my first bit of advice, is find something that actually stirs up some feelings for you, because it is a long road, that research. And you need to be quite passionate and have a stake in it. Okay, so I actually agreed with him. I don't often say that. But having been spent such a lot of time in schools, I actually agreed with him. And so did a lot of people, including, teachers and so on. And we sort of thinking about why is ICT in schools? Some work was done. And one of the reasons, look at that. So people who are qualified to teach their subject in some kind of acknowledged way, so they've got some kind of higher education or post-A-level education in teaching their subject, that was the picture. Really, and you can see that teachers of computing, we're looking at 35% being qualified to teach computing. So why were they teaching computing? Well, because it was called ICT and it was information communications technology, it was a lot about not programming, but actually working with software So working with Microsoft Office. Anyone got any experience of working, sort of either being involved in schools or your children being in schools in the UK or elsewhere, where they've worked in ICT, they've learned in ICT, and it's mostly been about learning Office? Does that resonate? Yeah. And that was one of the kind of issues, was that because ICT computing was a new subject, going back, one of the newest subjects we have, lots of teachers kind of got lumbered with teaching IT when it wasn't their main subject. So you get a lot of kind of people who had a bit of time on their hands and maybe were business teachers or had a background in mathematics or something, would end up teaching IT without necessarily being trained in IT. And as a trainer or an educator, we didn't get the people coming in with a computing background, a programming background, a technical background, wanting to be teachers of IT. Why not? Because they could go and make money doing something in computing and programming. If that's what they were doing, they'd be crazy to start on a salary of like 20,000 or something when they could go and presumably get more than that elsewhere, writing web pages and stuff. So that was one of the reasons. So that's a problem part one. And the problem part two was built into this thing that was called the cycle of decline, which was a really important report in 2012 saying shut down or restart, the way forward for computing in the UK schools. And their analysis was you start up with that, ICT being delivered by non-specialists, and then it has this awful kind of inevitability about it, which I won't read out. You can see that model for yourself. And that was an analysis of the problem. So what was anyone going to do about that? Okay, what to do about it? Okay, what do you think you could do given that situation? I'll go back to that slide if I can figure out how to do that. Previous slide. Just have a couple of minutes with the person next to you. You're Michael Gove, or you're in charge of computing in your country, in your area, and you identify a problem like that. What to do? Have a think. What can you do? Right, so you're all really clever people, so you'll have solved this by now. You'll have sorted this out. We've got a solution. So anybody got any thoughts they want to throw in here?
I'll give you Daria's solution. It's actually really good, I think, but encourage companies, like private companies, to put teachers into the schools. You know, people who are working in industry, to have them come into the schools as part of their profession, even doing a couple of hours a week here and there.
Like a secondment from industry, so building those partnerships between industry and schools and bringing kind of qualified people
and then also get them involved in the curriculum.
In designing the curriculum. Great one, yeah. Okay, that's a really good idea. So that's not your idea, that's already plagiarised, is it, from your colleague there? Just make a note of that. No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you for presenting that. Any other thoughts?
I have a similar one, which with parents, you could tap into the resource pool that parents can bring in, that they can have the skills which can be
so get them to come in and do
after school club or something.
Yeah, after school clubs. That's a
Coder Dojo.
Okay. Sorry?
It's the Coder Dojo group of people where there's volunteers coming into schools after school, using school premises at the weekends, and there are people who are adults really interested in coding, and the children come along and they code, and they just do what they want to do, and they do it at their level, and there's girls and boys and all abilities, and it really works. Getting kids to code.
You could just pay the teachers more.
Yeah.
Oh, bad. I was just going to say, before you spoiled it all, I was just going to say, Michael Gove will love these ideas because none of them involve any money from the government. And then you ruined it by saying, pay teachers more. Really shocking. Okay. Okay, so actually Gove was very clear about what the problem was. It wasn't the teachers, or so he said originally. It wasn't the teachers, it was the curriculum. That ICT was too broad. It ended up being about just software use, and he wanted to get it back to being rigorous and scientific and mathematical and a proper STEM subject, science, technology. So he decided that he would there and then, in that room, disestablish, the room where we all were in there, disestablish the ICT curriculum. Schools did no longer have to teach it, and we would all take a year and we'd come up with a new one, and then we'd put that into place next September. So, okay. And here were some of the quotes that he used about the ICT curriculum as it stood. It was boring, irrelevant, should be scrapped, off-putting, demotivating, dull. Nobody would ever have thought that the government had actually put together that curriculum in the first place. It was kind of, my hands are clean, it's all to do with the curriculum. Let's kill that bad curriculum and let's bring in a nice new curriculum and then everything will be fantastic. Okay.
It was a Labour curriculum.
True. Well, yeah, okay. So, I went away all fired up. And I had an underlying, my original plan, and what I actually put my proposal in was to look at how curriculum was constructed, what were the underlying attitudes and values and the context of the curriculum, and if possible to kind of research the people who were contributing to this to the curriculum and to get really involved in that kind of level and think about what is technology and learning, because you're probably thinking, what on earth has this got to do with TEL? And it was really about, what is it about technology and learning in schools, learning with technology, through technology, about technology? What is this link there? And can you kind of reify that into a curriculum that's going to solve this problem? However, I then got a new job within my organisation, but I then got the job of heading up the teaching training and teacher education rather than being on campus and it all comes to us. Another one of the reforms that the government made was to get a lot of the teachers out learning in schools on a programme called Schools Direct, where teachers went in and learned on the job. And so I was handling our partnership with 15 local schools where they had students in there, and so that was really, really busy. And so what I had to sort of do, and that's brilliant about this program, is I said, I think I need to take a year off and I need to get to grips with this new job. So I intercalated because this was a promotion for me. It was something I was really excited about doing, but I didn't see how I could actually do both at once. And the really good thing about this program is that you can do that. You can take some time to kind of, you got a really good reason for it, I presume. I don't know whether that was a good reason, but anyway, they said I could. And then I came back to it a year later, by which time, of course, the curriculum had been written. So my first idea and my first proposal was kind of out the window because it was a done deal by then. So what to do? Well, the curriculum was coming up to being introduced, and I decided to have a look instead about how it was being enacted in schools. What was actually going to happen when this new curriculum was presented. Because, and I read a lot of this guy Kelly, who's very good on sort of curriculum stuff. The curriculum is not teacher-proof. Teachers will subvert something, interpret something, So what was actually going to happen when this dynamic new curriculum hits the teaching profession? And how do they either go with it get on board or somehow subvert it or ignore it or whatever. And I think that's another in kind of point 2, if anyone's counting, is think about when you're doing your proposal and you're having your idea, how flexible is this going to be? Can I kind of change it if conditions change? Because the brilliant thing about doing an applied PhD is actually that it's applied. You know, you're doing something that really matters to you in your work context, presumably, hopefully. So actually work context being work context, they can change. So your professional context might change for whatever reason. So can you actually think through about how flexible you can be when you're framing what you're going to do? And luckily, there was enough wriggle room in my proposal for me not to have to submit again. I'm hoping now this isn't going to all be dug up again and investigated. But there was enough wriggle room in what I'd actually proposed. I kept it fairly loose. I don't know whether that was right or not, but it got through Gail Parkoma's hands. So, you know, think of your own risk analysis, because what can go wrong will go wrong. So do a little risk analysis when you're thinking about your research project. So here came the curriculum, and oh boy, was it different. Here's what was on the curriculum. Okay, I won't make you reading my notes, am I? Just burbling on. Okay, so a much more kind of rigorous approach to linking to things like coding and so on. So what would you imagine, perhaps somebody who doesn't know anything about the context of English education, what would you imagine a reaction to that was in the schools, given the picture?
How the hell am I going to teach that? Well, I was just thinking, they're coming from the ICT, the non-qualified, and then you look at this, I mean, it's a completely different kind of fish.
Yeah, pretty much. The reaction in schools was... Because remember, and this was all like next September, guys, here's your curriculum, and we waited and waited and waited for this thing, and it came out in draft, and well, next September, this is okay, get on with it, you know, this will happen right the way through from 5-year-olds to 16-year-olds, right the way through. This is also, because remember, there was a little quote. Because remember where these people are. And I mean, that's secondary, and they were well qualified, really, in primary school, because primary teachers were generalists. Very few had any kind of computing specialism there. And they were great with doing paint and creative things with the children, but coding, algorithms, not so much. Because the point about the curriculum, the way it was phrased, was we're going to make it sound really rigorous. And to be fair, the underlying rationale for that was we're going to make computing proud. We're going to make it raise its head again, you know. So it's not all this woolly, messy IT stuff or ICT stuff. It's going to be about rigorous stuff. Okay, so it's going to self-respect for computing was the buzz. But so they kind of deliberately phrased everything to make it sound really, really hard and clever. But of course, that kind of had a really profound effect in the schools. So I was kind of all the time for many years, been going in and out of schools and talking to teachers. And, you know, you get this huge woomph of how on earth are we going to do this? What we're going to do, because we haven't got the qualified people. And that problem, which was in that cycle of decline of not having a problem, hadn't gone away. So people did start to say things like your suggestions here. Let's get some parents in, do coding clubs. Let's get some industry people in. And some schools started that. And that was great, except they had a couple of problems with it. One of the problems was some of the people who were coming in from industry were kind of coming in to show everybody how all this stuff should do, coming in to impress. And they'd often been trained or educated in quite didactic environments. And so they were coming in and looking at a bunch of 6-year-olds and going, so JavaScript, not quite as bad as that, but there was a lot of that. And they were kind of patronizing to the teachers, you stand back, ICT is a mess, you've made a mess of this, let me show you how this should be, okay? So not everybody, there were some great people, but there was a bit of that. And the parents coming in as well, because the problem is that these people may be great and are great and have a lot to contribute, but just taking somebody from there and putting them into school in front of a bunch of children, the pedagogy is missing. They don't know how to teach. They don't know how to break things down. They don't know how to, so obviously that partnership was going to be important, but it wasn't just a quick translation of a person from one place to another. And that was kind of summarised for me. It was one of the key things, because that was what was being asked of people. You can't just say, well, your languages, so here you go, here's Chinese. You can't do that because you can't say you're ICT, so here's computing. And that's what she was really worried about this. And she was trying to get people to come in from universities and College of Further Education and so on to come and teach her classes for, because suddenly they didn't have they'd have a few people in school, but they didn't have this whole breadth. And so they were sort of getting people to come in and teach all the teachers how to code in Python or something. And they're sort of like, they're bright people, but that's just woof, So, this is my new set of research aims and objectives, really, which are quite modest. And it wasn't, I guess that looks quite neat. Yes?
I was just going to ask, you mentioned the panic that happened when it was enacted in school. There was no immediate initiative to do professional development for the teachers, because it may sound very complicated, but there's some very attractive and soft tools that you can use for kindergarten teachers to teach children in these types of countries.
That is a very, very good point. I think it was the speed, and eventually the government did soften on the idea of this is going to happen next September, and they gave some more time for people to get this embedded. And they said you don't have to do it all at once, you can kind of drift it in. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And it was that idea. And that was really, because there wasn't an immediate amount of funding, because we are talking about Michael Gove, so there wasn't, here you go, some money to do that with. It was like, so you can do this. I know you can do this. You go and build communities and do this. So, what I was doing as a teacher educator with a specialism in computing was doing what you say and taking things like Scratch, from MIT, and Mozilla. We were doing that. We were looking at the softer end of things and saying, really, in fact, you've actually scripted on a few slides. But yeah, absolutely right. It was, the initial reaction was really scared, but then we started to work through this as you do. So those were my sort of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it, which was really get out there in the field, which I already knew fairly well anyway, and start to unpick this and think about how best do we do this? How best does this university that I worked for then work in partnership with schools and others, including industry, including University of Lancaster, including various other places, to actually put in some support here that schools can access and afford. So that was basically what my research was going to do, was going to try and, to bridge that gap in that way. So that was this is my set of people. Each one of those lines is a subject leader responsible for the coordination and management of computing in their school, ranging from tiny rural primary schools with just 2 classes of children to a secondary school which was getting on for 1,800 children, which is still not very large, I guess, in terms of some of the schools that many of you will know about. But in the Northwest, schools tend to be quite small, even secondary schools. So there were primary, because I was looking at the whole of the sector because, you know, let's face it, potentially there's a market here for my university. And so they were paying or subsidising my PhD. So you've got to kind of, you know, do something they want you to do as well. And there was a market here for us to get out into schools and not only deliver some training or work with them, but also get them to take more of our students on placement. And, you know, there's financial and there's non-financial gain. So those were my, and you think, well, she just talked to 12 people then, huh? Wow, PhD. But actually, I did interviews with them, so hour-long interviews, and then observations of each one, doing 1, sometimes 2 classes, usually 2 classes actually, of focused teaching, whatever because most of them at this point were starting to try and do some of this algorithmic stuff. And then I did follow-up interviews, sort of debriefing them. How did that go? What would you have done differently? And I did kind of desk-based research as well, so document analysis. So what I wanted to do was build up a picture in each of those schools as to how they're managing this and where are the gaps and what do they need. Okay, so it was manageable, but it went quite deep. I think that was the thing. I didn't want to have a questionnaire for hundreds of people. I just wanted to get it, you know, manageable. Manageable is the thing, because every one of these interviews and stuff that you do has got to be transcribed or something, you know, so it's going to be, that's a lot of work. So think about the budget of work that you're going to be doing, really, your budget to manage it. And those were my questions. You know, were they on board? What extent did the subject leaders support the case for change? Because if they completely don't, you've got a problem. It's like before, the curriculum is not teacher-proof. You've got a problem. What are the problems or enablers in schools? So what are the conditions like? And what did they think were their own and their team's development needs? So basically, I sort of go in, and I did take advantage of insider status because I used people I'd already worked with in their schools. I was more interested in the spread of gender, age, experience, and type of school. That's what I really focused on in my selection of teachers, because I know lots of these guys. So I was able to kind of get a real spread of different kinds of people with different backgrounds and different attitudes, and so that I'd have that without sort of trying to be, you know, trying to get everybody. I got a sample that was very diverse. And because I already had some relationship of trust with them, I'd sort of go in and say, so is ICT in this school in a mess? Ha, ha, ha. You know, at the beginning of the interview, and then it'd have burble. They would really come out then, it kind of broke the ice. And so slightly risky strategy, but it was all right, it paid off. And then, so basically that boiled down to, is ICT in your school a mess? Why? And what do you want to do to sort it out? Basically, that was kind of what I was asking. So, what's coming next? I think I'm going to have to speed up, actually, because, I don't know, I've got about half an hour left, haven't I?
Yeah.
And there's some other stuff that I kind of want to focus on. I was going to ask you, really, what you thought the purpose of schooling was, because if you go back to the curriculum and you think this is being taught in schools, you think about why. You know, what are we actually trying to do in a school? What is the end product going to be when this child pops out of the other end of the educational system? You know, the purpose of schooling is that somebody has got an idea of what we want them to look like, what we want them to be, in a sense. So actually the curriculum tries to reify that and say, in order to get this product at this end, we need to do these things in this way. So that's kind of the curriculum in a sense. And a couple of Kelly again and a guy called Scott, David Scott, was saying, so the designers of the curriculums have got something going on in their head, and one of the things that Michael Gove was very clear about was what was going on in his head was he wanted people who were going to pop out at the end and go and work in the games industry and the technology industry. So it was very much about training people for skills that they would use later in life. And most teachers don't kind of see themselves as being training for a job people. So there was slight conflict there. So I did a lot of thinking, and a lot of reading about the curriculum. And this will turn out to be important in more ways than one, as you'll see in the next few slides. But I really tried to get to grips with, okay, so I've been in the system since the beginning of the national curriculum, 1988. I kind of started in teaching then. And so I haven't known anything else really. All right, the curriculum's changed a bit, and there was a big reform in 2003 and so on. But I kind of never thought about any of this. It was just like, this is what you've got to do, this is what you teach. And so I never really questioned it. And this was the beginning for me of thinking, how else could it be? And actually, why has this government and this set of consultants come up with this kind of curriculum? What are they trying to do? So I got really deeply into that. And I came up with models that you won't find anywhere, because I sort of looked at lots of people's ideas and then I tried to classify them. So I won't bore you with or will I bore you with it? Maybe I will. Really, I was looking at sort of what was the purpose of the curriculum, how it's going to be delivered. And this was what I defended in my writing and my literature review, was this is what I've looked at, this is what I've come up with, and I'm going to try and sort of think about what actually should be in a curriculum and why. So I have got a page of notes on that, but I think you'll all fall asleep. So the thesis is in the library. You can go and read it. If anybody's interested, we can talk later. I'm thinking about who decides what should be learned. Who is this? Where does this come from, this curriculum? Who gets to say what our children are going to learn in school? And I put a journalist, because the sainted Michael Gove actually is a journalist. He did some economics as well, but his main career that he's returned to is journalism. And, whatever I felt or anybody felt about him, he really reignited a debate which is implicit in these models, is what is knowledge? What is the place of knowledge? What do we mean by knowledge? Everybody's saying, well, we've got to deliver this knowledge about computing, and we've got to understand, they've got to know how to do this, and they've got to know how. What? What is it? Anyway, so you probably all know, but I had what am I trying to do as a teacher educator? What am I trying to do in this job? So he did reignite a very important debate about the place of knowledge, which moved on from him and went in some interesting directions. And he introduced the idea of social justice, because the second of those models, I don't know if people are familiar with the work of E.D. Hirsch in the United States, who had this idea that you could actually have a set of knowledge, facts, key things that every person should know in order to be successful in society. So in America, they should know about the various sort of conflicts and wars and independence, and they should know about a certain set of key facts about things. And that you could actually write all that down, and then you go and teach it in schools, and then everybody sat in the same conversation. And he said that schools, what he was finding, because he was a teacher, It's way back. We're going way back into the, I can't remember, 80s, wasn't it? So he was saying in schools, if you take children of from more deprived backgrounds and you say, I'm just going to teach you from what you know and from your life experience, and you don't expose them to all the Shakespeare and the Mozart and the history and the this and the that and the Dickens and the literature, then you are actually disabling them when they go out, because they will immediately be spotted by the people who have got stuff and are socially privileged as not being there. So you're actually not giving them that life opportunity. And, you know, there was a real kind of reawakening to thinking maybe there's something in that. And I mean, Gove was totally for that. And he actually started to make that list. You know, he was busily writing the lists of kings and queens in England. Yeah?
I was just going to say that may have something to do with core curriculum at some institutions. So some institutions set up core curriculum for everyone who attends that university to study and know for sure when they leave. And that they sort of moved on to changing that to address, you know, well, some institutions changing it to address current problems in the world that people are experiencing. It's a great point.
I think you're absolutely, that was my understanding of it, but it's good to have it confirmed from you. And actually the idea here was to do, and in fact public schools here, which are the sort of paid for schools, and probably not what you'd call public schools in the States, but they're kind of paid, have always kind of had that. So the idea is that you then bring that to all areas of society and you say, these are the important things that you need to know. But the problem with it was that it was almost like, well, we're going to, and people did put lists together, and there's a guy in this country, Toby Young, who started some free schools, and they had a curriculum which said, you know, these are the things the children will learn in this school, and it's facts and facts and facts, like Dickens, is it Gradgrind and Dickens? You know, it's facts and more facts, and these are the important facts. But the point is, who decides which facts the children are going to learn? So this debate about knowledge actually kind of moved on from this to talking about other kinds of knowledge. And where I got really intrigued and what really helped me was to think of this kind of dichotomy between the knowledge of the powerful, which we've just been talking about. So I think I've actually... So the knowledge of the values, culture and aspirations determined and modelled by a dominant social class, so all that Mozart and stuff, but also powerful knowledge, which was a concept mostly espoused by a guy called Michael F.D. Young, no relation to Toby, although he also is related to a Michael Young, but not that one. So this was an idea that you'd have a context-independent knowledge. So it wouldn't be about facts, but it would be about criticality, really. How to use tools and concepts and judgment to actually test propositions and develop new knowledge and things like this. And this is where it got really interesting for me. And I promise I'm only going to talk for another 5 minutes, because we can always pick it up later. But it got really interesting for me because I got very involved in this kind of idea of, yeah, okay, maybe powerful knowledge is something to go with. And the Michael Young, was a critical realist. And so I got hit in the face with an express train of critical realism, which I'd never even heard of before. And I felt a resonance with it. So I'll talk a bit about it maybe later on, but for me, having done all this exploration, which grew out of what I really wanted to do, without worrying at all about methodology or ontology or epistemology, because I faked that in my MSc. I just pretended. I just wrote something that sounded okay, but I didn't really feel it. So it wasn't really, you know, it's got through. It will now be withdrawn, that qualification. I'm now on film saying I faked it in my MSc. Oh God, what am I doing? But yeah, I mean, I sort of understood it, but I didn't feel it. It wasn't from here. I hadn't got anything that had that real resonance. And so I thought, well, I'll just concentrate on what I'm really interested in and read and read and read, and hopefully that will come. Hopefully that will come. And you know what it did? So actually, as part of all this, by working out where I was aligning myself with things, I did it. I kind of got this ontology and epistemology. And then from then on, I won't say it was plain sailing, but I suddenly felt like I'd achieved that magical alignment of all my ducks were in a row, because now I'd got what I felt about it. I got my perspective and approach. I'd got my ontology and my epistemology, because I could then read and read what all the critical realists thought, and then I ended up moving on a little bit from that. But it gave me my in. And so then the methodology just grew out of that, because obviously that's all got to be aligned. And that's, I think, what your examiners and your tutors are looking for, you know, to get that in a line so that it kind of hangs together and makes sense, your approach, with everything is being consistent. But, you know, it wasn't easy, but it did. There was that kind of aha moment when I found what really resonated with me, and I got my ducks in a line. And then actually it was hard work, but it wasn't desperate and puzzled work. It was work, you know, and I could enjoy it, and I could take my perspective, and I could analyse my data and everything. I think I have got more, and maybe look at a bit more after, because I've got bits about critical realism, whether you're interested or not. But I guess people are feeling like they may want to dip in now and have a bit of a question time for, do they all know about the surprise?
No.
Okay. Oops.
Not at all.
Perhaps you can do that then.
Okay.
Talk about that.
Okay, before we go on to anything else, can we thank Debbie?
It isn't over. It is not all over. You've still got some more of this.
Okay, I'm actually. We're actually going to. It's now coming up to 10:30, and I'm going to break this session at 11:15, because some people are going to come in, and you know that this particular time is the sort of the 10th anniversary celebration. And one of the people who's been at the backbone of this programme has been Alice. And I particularly wanted to do a small presentation to her. But we have got a bit of time before then. So, and I think that that's been really fascinating. And thank you for your honesty. And your openness. I mean, might I say, I didn't mark the MSc.
And the person who did no longer works here.
So in my defence, yeah. But I think the point that Deb is making is really an important one. You know that there is a distinction here between an MSc or an M anything, which is a master of some sort of content arena, and a PhD, which is to do with philosophy. It's a doctor of philosophy. And I do think that what Deb has said is really important in that respect, and it draws out this idea of your thinking at a depth, at a philosophical depth. You know, and that's why these concepts like epistemology and ontology, and considering the paradigms that you're working in, and your critical thinking on things is an important one. But it takes time to get there, you know, which is what Debbie has said. It's not something that you can expect to happen necessarily in a week or in a month. You know, it's something where you develop that, and it's something that does develop, and that's what we're about in the programme, if you like. That's what we're focusing on. We're trying to help you to get to that moment. You know, the moment of alignment of the ducks. I think that's really nice. Yeah. So you know, that's what we're aiming to do, and we, at this stage, we're sort of putting pieces together, if you like, and but it is to do that with that, and it's that sort of thinking through it at that philosophical level, and having enough of that background to be able to see the underpinning assumptions and questions and what concepts you are actually working with. You know, you were hearing the other day, or at least half of you, I think, were hearing the other day from Kyung-mi and Brett about this idea of theoretical and conceptual frameworks, and that again is to do with those sorts of. It's to do with that sort of approach and thinking. It's to do with this idea that you're thinking at that sort of philosophical level. So I think so. Thank you, Debbie. I think you've brought out some really, really important points there that are critical and crucial to what you're doing now in terms of working forward with the programme. And there's actually lots and lots that I could pick up on and talk about from what you've said, which is great. But rather than that, rather than my talking, I think, you know, within the time that we've got before we break, I guess that you may have questions and comments that you want to raise at this point. Yeah. So let's open the floor. Let's open it for a discussion. What sort of any comments, thoughts, questions you'd like to put at this time? Osama.
What's your lowest point and highest point?
I think one of the highest points was this. When it clicked, it was like a kaleidoscope, you know, when you have those and everything's going round, and then suddenly it clicks into a pattern that means something. And that was such a high point. And I have to say the other high point was coming out of that on Fiverr and being told that I just, you know, just a few corrections and I was done, you know. I mean, it was huge. Low points, the low points weren't that low. I think it was just the grind of it, really, because my office at home is upstairs and we live in a kind of country area, and loads of people go down our road on their way to do fun things, cycling, dog walking, everything. And, you know, I think the summer I was doing a lot of writing. I was trudging up there, you know, evenings, weekends, all the holidays, every minute that I could spare out of my job, because at that point, I didn't get any time off to do this. So I was doing a full-time job and then coming home and having something to eat and then trudging upstairs and watching everybody going, this is great. And that was, you know, and I think actually what the PhD does for you, okay, it puts the pH in it and it gives you all this, but it gives you the resilience and the persistence and that and the blood, sweat and tears that, you know, I am going to do this. I am going to do this. I'm not going to flake out on this one. I can do it. I'm going to do it. And that was hard sometimes. And I did have some strategies that I'll share later. But yeah, it wasn't a low. I never had a really low point. I'm going to throw this in. I can't do it. Well, maybe I thought at first I can't do this because everybody else on my course was so clever. Oh my God. So I went in, you know, cohort 3, here we all are. And then we all had to do this like presentation thingy. I don't know if you still do that on day 1, you know. We had to do this presentation and, you know, some of them were out there and they were throwing these words about paradigms of that, and having faked it, obviously, I had no clue what they were talking about. And I think that was maybe the end of that first bit, and also online, those online discussions. What are they like? So you'd go in and you'd do your reading and you'd make the notes and think, okay, and here's my idea, and I'm going to go there and I'm going to put, oh my God, look what that person said. Because they either said something so profound you couldn't understand it, or they said something so beautifully, perfectly what you'd been groping towards And it's like, right, that's it. I can't do this because everybody else is so clever. And I'm not, I think I said to my husband a couple, I'm not PhD material. You said that. Sorry to draw attention to you, but we all say that, I think. Maybe some people don't. Lucky them. I'm sure Don didn't. PhD material from the cradle. But, really. But stick with it, because I'm no intellectual giant, trust me. Well, you've probably worked that out. You've worked that out for yourselves, haven't you? But, stick with it. That's kind of, I think at the beginning there was this, I got in the PhD and not everybody did. And I got selected and wow, and then I went off a cliff. And then I started to get back into it. And that was okay.
Then you got into IKEA.
Then I went into IKEA. Yeah, the whole thing was being in IKEA. Really, it was being in IKEA. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for your question. Anybody else? You've got to ask me something else because we've got 10 minutes before Alice gets here. Come on. I've stunned them all into absolute silence here. Oh, no, we got a question. Oh, sorry. You, then you.
The point where you made the decision to intercalate was a very difficult thing to do because I suppose we often kind of think whether this obviously kind of it's a marathon rather than a sprint. And the worry is that if we stop, we might not be able to get started again.
It was really difficult what I didn't mention there was, I took on this job and initially I didn't intercalate and I'd done my proposal and that had gone through fine and I thought, oh God, I don't want to have to do that again. And so I just want to keep on with the momentum. But the job suddenly became very demanding physically as well because I was going all over the Northwest, from Bolton in the morning to up to Carlisle and all over, meeting with the schools, sorting out all these problems. It was kind of a really, really big job and quite untested. Nobody had really knew how this was going to look. And I actually my health broke down a little bit. And I had to actually have 6 weeks off work or something because I just got into a really physically bad state. And so that was a wake up. Something's got to give. And actually I'd got the promotion at work and I didn't want to let that go. I didn't want to go down to being senior lecturer again, having got the principal lecturer thing. So I thought, right, okay, something's got to give. And I talked to Alice, who advised me how to manage it and what would happen. They take all the library stuff off you. You are not a member of the university during that intercalation period. But it was okay because I bought a lot of books anyway. And I was still working in the area and it just gave me a bit more time to kind of percolate. But it's not something that everybody should know that you'll have a mass of people wanting to intercalate now. It is in extremis, and if my health hadn't broken down in the way it did, I would have kept going, but it actually, I had to give myself time to recover because I wasn't pacing myself, and I took a more sensible approach to it when I came back and set out when I was doing things and tried to get a bit more balance and a bit more exercise and stuff, so Does that answer the question? I mean, it was okay to pick it up because I was still working in the same area, but it's that idea of, have you built in a risk analysis and can you be flexible? Or is it all about one kind of project at work or something that's, or can you think about how you might need to pace yourself or be able to pace yourself if you need to? Okay, somebody...
Maybe I could add on to that.
Yeah, please do, because we'll find out the regulations now.
No, I'm not coming at it from a regulation point of view. I'm coming at it from a personal point of view, which is that it really depends upon, to some extent, whether you feel that you can pick up things after an intercalation and whether you can persist from that point on. And undoubtedly, some folk can, and others find it really difficult to get back into it, and that is a reality. And it's not easy to tell which of the camps you're going to be in. You know, some folk feel that it's going to be really hard and they're not going to be able to do it afterwards, and yet they can. So it is a balance, and it's that balance which actually often becomes the difficult one when you're thinking about going into an intercalation period. You know, I would say do take some time in actually thinking about it, but at the end of the day, you know, you also have to think about your well-being and how you can cope with things, and that's a really, really important element. You know, you're not going to succeed as well if you're not on par. You know, you need to be in touch with things as much as possible, and you know, the one thing I would say is if you do want to consider an intercalation, just talk to us. You know, you should talk to your supervisor, you should talk to Alice, whomever, but talk to us, because we have experience of that, and we can talk through. Different people will be able to talk through different dimensions of that. But it's not something that you should rule out. You know, it's something you should consider at various stages, because things do happen in the background, which, you know, that's life. You know, we're all working through life, you know, as well as working towards a PhD. We're working with life, and you have to work with those things and balance them. So, yeah, I don't think about regulations in this respect. It's you know.
Well, I think it is about this kind of PhD as well, because it's not the paid PhD, funded PhD, where you go for 4 years into the university or whatever, and you've got, you know, you're carrying out your research and you've got the support around you and things to do that. You know, we've got so many things going on in this kind of PhD, and it's part-time, and it's you know, so it is great that actually the department completely does understand, and I reiterate what Don just said, you know, right from the very earliest days, there was always somebody you could talk to who would talk through the pros and cons, including how easy is it going to be to pick this up again? What are your plans for that? How will you do that? So it's not something you suddenly announce one day, that's it, I'm off. You know, do take that time to do it in a planned way. Yeah, sorry, what was the question here?
So you mentioned risk and management and identification of. So you're working in an area where the government could change their mind all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So how did you plan for that kind of situation? And did it ever happen that your plan got disrupted because the government changed their mind? And if it did, then
constantly.
Constantly. What your strategy to tackle that situation?
Yeah. That's a really, really good question, because that's, you know, that's a liability, I guess, for everybody in this room. And I think my advice, such as it is to look at the underlying themes that are still going to be relevant. You know, so don't think about the sort of surface area of this particular project or this particular curriculum change or this. Look underneath. So my project, I thought going into it, right, okay, I'm going to do this top level stuff here, and I'm going to do this very simple. And my questions and my aims and things are very simple, actually, really simple aims, objectives, questions. You know, very basic. But the themes underneath it kept me going, because that was really quite deep, and that was I could shift, because I was basically looking at a theme of knowledge, a theme of teacher education, a theme of change in organisations like schools, which are crazy places, actually, having worked with crazy people in them. And, you know, and change is very hard for schools to process, for all kinds of reasons. That isn't always appreciated outside of the education system, just how hard it is to manage change in an organisation that is so regulated, but then they've got to kind of keep the day job going, but they're being observed and regulated all the time. So those themes about change management and stuff was what really, and I think I could have and did kind of refocused slightly, but the theme stayed the same underneath that I was really interested in and what my literature review had looked at, for example. So I got that. That's how I managed the risk. Yeah. Okay.
And I think this, you know, one of the things that come out to me from what Debbie's done is this sort of thinking about change, that it's not so much that, in a sense, the technology is there and the technology enhanced learning is there, but in essence it's the change arena that's actually important in terms of what Debbie was doing with work. And I think that's often the case with technology arenas, that one is looking at change arenas as well. So you know, I've heard from you over the past few days about your thoughts and the sorts of thinking that's going on, and a lot of those are to do with these ideas of change, whether it's to do with teachers changing and taking things on board, whether it's to do with curriculum changing, whether it's to do with technological change. A lot of this is to do with change, and therefore underlying a lot of the area of TEL are these concepts of change and what they mean, which I think are very, very important. And of course, as soon as you get into change, you're talking about particular features and factors of change and particular conceptions of change, which themselves I think are quite interesting. And you know, I think the idea of what Debbie was looking at in terms of this sort of policy-driven change, or even Secretary of State-driven change, you could all I think would probably be as near as it was, because in this case it was literally, all of the evidence suggests that it was one person that actually brought about that change. It was Michael Gove as the Secretary of State who brought about that change. It was a single person's drive that did that. So any of the positive or negative that comes out of it is probably down to one person in the end, even though particular advice and guidance is taken. It was very much a policy change which was driven by an individual. Probably, I mean,
one person's concept of what a curriculum should, what knowledge is and what a curriculum should look like.
Indeed, and you know, really interesting, because in a way you could say that if that's the case, one should actually know a lot about that individual to understand the policy of change. Trying to understand that individual is a completely different matter. I mean, I think that he's probably the only Secretary of State that was actually taken to court by 7 local authorities at one point, and is probably the only Secretary of State for Education that I can remember who said quite openly that there should be no discussion between pupils in classrooms. Children should be there, sat in rows, learning. He in a report that was given to him, he actually made a statement saying, "I want no discussion in classrooms." So, you know, it's a very, very interesting one, really, the whole arena and how you think of it in terms of change.
I'm not sure if Alice is here, but please, is she here? Great.
Outside.
Fantastic.
I did not set you up. She thinks I set her up now.
No. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I mean, I've deliberately interrupted and rearranged the programme a little because there's time for a very, very important announcement. Okay, which I have to make for everyone. As you know, we have this 10th anniversary celebration of the programme, and I think it's quite rightly being called a flagship by one of our externals. Now, you can only have a flagship if you have people behind it. You know, the making of a flagship is the making of is due to the people that are behind that flagship. So it's thrived because of you as doctoral researchers, but also because of those of the rest of us who've been there to try and help it along a bit. Imagine, however, someone who has had to process 367 applications. Can you imagine what that is like? Having to take them in, handle them, manage them, work through the university in terms of how to get those things through. There are of you now 133 doctoral researchers. 94 of you are from the UK and the EU, and the 39 are from countries beyond. Imagine all of your emails that come in. Imagine all of your queries that come in. Imagine all of your concerns that come in and how they have to be handled. Can you count up the number? Okay, imagine the drafts and the theses and the vivas for the 34 that have been completed and awarded and how those are handled. Can you imagine how to do that? And also those where there are 4 that have already been submitted. So all of the handling of the process beyond that, when there are revisions required, and all of that that's required in terms of the liaison with examiners and the liaison with the university. Can you imagine that? And imagine those who then go through and complete in terms of taking an MRes. Beyond that, even more problematic, of course, are those of us that are staff involved. I mean, imagine having to handle us. And in particular, having to handle me. I mean, can you imagine that? You know? I've been around you for a few days, but you know, imagine that I have to be around you for a few years. Okay? You can imagine the difficulty of that. Well, who's been responsible for all of that? Well, I can tell you, it's been Alice. And she's done that for the last 10 years from the beginning of the programme, which I think is absolutely remarkable. And Alice, I'd like to thank you. And I'd like to...
Thank you very much. And azalea, my husband will be delighted because he loves azaleas because they're always out for the Masters golf. And he always says, why don't we have more of those? I said, we don't live in America. But no, we've got one now. I even know it needs special soil, doesn't it? Not to look after them. So thank you very, very much. It's been a pleasure. I mean, it has its moments, but I must like it because I wouldn't still be here, would I? So thank you again. Thank you very much. And you lot for behind my back.
So we look forward to the next 10 years, yes?
So whether you get another 10 years is under debate. Possibly not.
I'm not sure there can be much debate about it, Alice.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right, we have a conference to be at. I'm coming here, I'm going, yeah, loads of time. No, we don't, we're going now.
Alice, we thought you were coming shortly.
Oh. Thank you again. See you all later.